La'an Noonien-Singh. You're one of us.
What if I told you that the greatest mystery in Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 4 isn't the ghost haunting the USS Griffin, it's the woman standing beside La'an? At first glance, Rose Harper looks like nothing more than another victim of the Griffin's disappearance. But the deeper you look, the more unsettling the truth becomes. Harper wasn't chosen randomly. Neither was La'an. The episode quietly reveals that these two women share far more than the same Starfleet rank. They may be connected by the very force that destroyed an entire Federation starship. For 9 years, the USS Griffin drifted through space with over 300 crew members missing. No battle, no distress call explaining their fate, no bodies. When Kirk, Spock, and La'an finally step aboard, they expect to uncover an old Starfleet mystery. Instead, they walk into something that challenges everything Star Trek has taught us about science, reality, and even death. But here's the biggest mystery everyone overlooked. Did the Griffin actually destroy its crew, or was it searching for someone worthy to replace them? And if that's true, was La'an its real target all along? Let's break down the true history of the USS Griffin, who Rose Harper really was, and why this terrifying mystery is almost certainly not over. The Griffin incident is unlike almost any episode Star Trek has ever produced. Yes, the franchise has explored horror before, but this story isn't about monsters hiding in the shadows. It's about something far more terrifying, an enemy that weaponizes your own memories, fears, guilt, and regrets until you can't tell reality from illusion. What's fascinating is that the episode refuses to answer its biggest questions outright. Instead, it scatters clues throughout Harper's logs, Spock's investigation, Kirk's hallucinations, and La'an's emotional breakdown. When those clues are pieced together, a disturbing picture begins to emerge. The USS Griffin wasn't simply a haunted ship. It became the prison of an unknown force that consumed an entire crew from the inside out. And long before La'an ever stepped aboard, Rose Harper had already discovered the horrifying truth. The history of the USS Griffin. 9 years before the events of the Griffin incident, the USS Griffin was a standard Federation vessel carrying more than 300 officers and crew. Nothing suggested the mission would become one of Starfleet's greatest unsolved mysteries. Then, without warning, the Griffin disappeared. No final transmission explaining what happened. No distress signal describing an attack. No debris field. The ship simply vanished. For nearly a decade, Starfleet had no answers. The Griffin became another lost vessel among countless unexplained disappearances scattered throughout Federation history. Everything changes when Kirk, Spock, and La'an detect a faint distress beacon during their return journey from the future leaders of the Federation Conference. The signal leads them to the missing ship, floating silently in deep space exactly where no one expected to find it. At first glance, the Griffin doesn't look like a ship that has been abandoned for 9 years. The lights flicker. Artificial gravity still works. The air remains breathable. Crew quarters appear untouched. Coffee mugs still sit on desks. Equipment remains exactly where people left it. It's almost as if the entire crew simply walked away at the same moment. Except no one did, because there are no escape pods, no transporter records showing an evacuation, no bodies, nothing. That eerie emptiness is one of the episode's strongest clues. It tells us that whatever happened aboard the Griffin wasn't a normal disaster. The ship itself survived. Its people didn't. And that's where Rose Harper enters the story. The USS Griffin wasn't destroyed by phasers, torpedoes, or an invading enemy. It was destroyed by something far more terrifying. An invisible force capable of turning fear into a weapon and guilt into a prison. An entire Starfleet crew collapsed from within because they could no longer trust their own minds. Rose Harper fought to contain that evil, but she failed. 9 years later, Kirk, Spock, and La'an walked into the same nightmare. Kirk confronted his guilt as a father. Spock faced the war between his human and Vulcan identities. But La'an endured something different. She wasn't just tested, she was chosen. Whether the force aboard the Griffin is an unknown alien, a supernatural presence, or something Star Trek has never encountered before, one thing is certain. its story isn't finished. Harper's final silent warning and the arrival of Division 12 suggest that the Griffin is only the beginning of a much larger mystery. WHO was Rose Harper? As Kirk, Spock, and La'an cautiously move deeper into the USS Griffin, one question immediately begins to dominate the episode. Where did everyone go? A ship carrying over 300 Starfleet officers should be filled with signs of struggle, emergency evacuations, or at least the remains of its crew. Instead, every corridor is eerily silent. The lights flicker on and off. The air is breathable. Personal belongings remain exactly where they were left. It's as though the crew vanished in the middle of an ordinary workday. Then they see her. A lone Starfleet officer standing in the darkness. Lieutenant Rose Harper, the Griffin's chief security officer. For only a brief moment, she appears completely real. She watches the away team from the shadows before disappearing without a sound. She doesn't attack. She doesn't speak. She simply vanishes, leaving behind a trail of negatively charged ions. Something Kirk immediately notices shouldn't exist if this were an ordinary person. That single clue changes everything. Is Harper alive? Is she a ghost, a hologram, or something far more dangerous? The episode never gives us a definitive answer, and that's exactly what makes her so unsettling. The security chief who never left. As the team investigates further, La'an discovers the Griffin's surviving security logs. Initially, they appear to be routine mission reports. Harper calmly documents the strange behavior spreading among the crew. Officers are becoming paranoid. Small disagreements are escalating into violence. People claim to see impossible things. Crew members are attacking one another without explanation. At first, Harper believes she's dealing with some kind of infection. Not a virus, not a disease, but something affecting the mind. She repeatedly warns that whatever is happening must never be allowed to leave the Griffin. Those warnings reveal something important. Unlike the rest of the crew, Harper understood the danger before it was too late. She wasn't trying to save only herself. She was trying to save the entire Federation. That suggests Harper remained rational longer than almost anyone else aboard the ship. But eventually, even she begins to change. The video logs become impossible. This is where the episode quietly becomes terrifying. La'an continues watching Harper's recordings, expecting to learn what happened during the Griffin's final days. Instead, the recordings begin changing. Harper stops speaking to her own crew. She starts speaking directly to La'an. Think about what that means. These logs were recorded 9 years earlier. There is absolutely no scientific reason they should know La'an's name or react to her presence. Yet Harper looks directly into the camera as if she has been waiting for La'an all along. That moment tells us something is manipulating the recordings in real time. Whether it's the entity itself, Harper's lingering consciousness, or some unknown phenomenon, the message is clear. The Griffin didn't simply recognize intruders. It recognized La'an specifically. And from that moment onward, the investigation stops being about solving an old mystery. It becomes deeply personal. The mirror between Harper and La'an. The writers didn't choose Harper's profession by accident. Both women are chief security officers. Both are responsible for protecting their crews. Both are natural survivors. Both carry emotional burdens they rarely reveal. This parallel is one of the smartest pieces of storytelling in the episode. Harper represents exactly what La'an fears becoming, a protector who ultimately couldn't protect anyone. As La'an watches Harper's recordings, she slowly begins seeing herself in Harper's place. The line between the past and present begins to blur. The Griffin isn't simply showing La'an another officer's memories. It's forcing her to imagine that she is Harper. That psychological connection becomes even stronger when Harper repeatedly insists that La'an is one of us. At first, that line sounds cryptic, but later it takes on an entirely different meaning. The entity doesn't see La'an as an outsider. It sees her as someone who already belongs. The Griffin destroyed itself. Spock's investigation uncovers perhaps the episode's most disturbing revelation. Medical records show the crew didn't die from disease. They died from each other. Some were stabbed, some strangled, others were blown into space through opened airlocks. No external enemy boarded the Griffin. No invading fleet attacked it. The crew became their own worst enemy. That's what makes the Griffin so terrifying. Unlike the Borg, unlike the Gorn, unlike the Dominion, there is no visible enemy to fight. The real weapon is fear itself. Every officer aboard the Griffin slowly lost the ability to distinguish reality from illusion. Once that happened, trust disappeared. Paranoia replaced reason. Friends became enemies. and an entire Starfleet crew destroyed itself without ever understanding what they were truly fighting, while La'an was the entity's true target. Up until this point, the episode encourages us to believe that Kirk, Spock, and La'an are simply the latest victims of whatever destroyed the USS Griffin. Each of them experiences terrifying hallucinations. Each of them is forced to confront their deepest fears. On the surface, it seems like the entity attacks everyone equally. But if you watch carefully, that isn't what actually happens. The entity isn't treating all three officers the same. It is studying La'an. Kirk's hallucinations revolve around guilt. He hears the cries of his son David, forcing him to relive his greatest failure as a father. Spock is confronted by T'Pring and his lifelong struggle between his Vulcan and human identities. Their visions are deeply personal, but they're also temporary. The entity wants to torment them. With Lei, however, something very different happens. Instead of simply showing her painful memories, the entity begins trying to change her. That distinction is the biggest clue in the entire episode. The Griffin sees the monster La'an fears. Long before the Griffin ever appears, Strange New Worlds has been building La'an's internal conflict. She's the descendant of La'an Noonien-Singh, one of the most infamous figures in Star Trek history. Even though she has spent her entire life proving she is nothing like her ancestor, she carries the burden of that legacy every day. Season 4's premiere intensifies those fears. After her transformation into a Vulcan in the previous season, La'an begins noticing disturbing changes. She is stronger than before. She feels less pain. Her anger is harder to control. She starts wondering whether something dormant inside her has awakened. Importantly, the series never confirms that her augment DNA has actually been activated. What it confirms is that La'an believes she may be changing. That fear becomes part of her emotional state, and the Griffin exploits it. When Harper tells her, "You're one of us," the line lands with such force because it echoes La'an's deepest insecurity. She has spent years fearing that there is a monster inside her waiting to emerge. The entity doesn't need to create that fear. It simply amplifies what already exists. This is why La'an's experience is different from Kirk's or Spock's. The Griffin isn't just showing her nightmares, it's encouraging her to become one. Why La'an attacks Kirk. One of the episode's most shocking moments comes when La'an stabs James T. Kirk. Many viewers assume the entity completely possessed her, turning her into a puppet. But the episode presents something more unsettling. Unlike a mind-control parasite, the Griffin's influence appears to work by breaking down trust and distorting perception. Victims act on what they believe is real. Earlier, the crew of the Griffin killed one another because they could no longer distinguish friend from foe. The same pattern repeats here. La'an doesn't wake up intending to murder Kirk. She is manipulated into believing she must act. By the time reality catches up with her, the damage has already been done. That makes the scene tragic rather than villainous. The entity isn't forcing actions against someone's will. It is convincing people that those actions are necessary. That's exactly how the Griffin's original crew destroyed themselves. History is repeating itself, the hidden meaning behind Harper's final appearance. After the away team is rescued, the horror should be over. Spock receives treatment. Kirk contacts his family. Captain Pike quietly reassures La'an that not everything can be explained through science. The audience finally gets a chance to breathe. Then the episode delivers its most chilling image. La'an looks through the Enterprise window. Outside, she sees the Griffin. Standing there is Rose Harper. She doesn't scream. She doesn't threaten anyone. She simply smiles, raises a finger to her lips, and silently says, "Shh." That single gesture changes the ending completely. If Harper were only a hallucination created aboard the Griffin, she should have disappeared the moment La'an left the ship. Instead, she appears again after the rescue. The episode never explains whether this is another hallucination, a lingering psychological effect, or evidence that the entity remains connected to La'an. What it does make clear is that La'an's story is not over. The Griffin may have been left behind, but whatever found La'an aboard that ship may not have let her go. The ending explained what really haunted the USS Griffin. After nearly an hour of psychological horror, hallucinations, and unimaginable violence, the Griffin incident ends without providing the one answer everyone expected. What was actually inside the USS Griffin? For longtime Star Trek fans, that's unusual. This franchise almost always finds a scientific explanation for the impossible. Strange energy beings become understood. Time anomalies are analyzed. Even godlike creatures such as the Q continuum eventually fit into Star Trek's broader mythology. But the Griffin is different. It represents one of those rare mysteries that Starfleet itself cannot explain. That is exactly why the episode becomes so unsettling. Sometimes, the most frightening answer is that there isn't one. Was it a ghost, an alien, or something else? Based on everything the episode actually shows, there are three possibilities. The first is that the Griffin encountered an unknown, non-corporeal life form. Star Trek has introduced energy beings before creatures capable of manipulating perception, emotion, and even reality. The negative ion trail surrounding Harper hints that whatever appears aboard the Griffin isn't entirely physical. If that's true, then the entity may simply be another life form, unlike anything Starfleet has encountered before. The second possibility is that the Griffin truly is haunted. Normally, Star Trek avoids supernatural explanations, but this episode repeatedly challenges that assumption. Pike even shares a childhood story about seeing a ghost, not as proof, but as a reminder that there are experiences even Starfleet officers cannot fully explain. Rather than dismissing La'an's fears, he tells her that some mysteries simply remain mysteries. Then there's the third possibility, and perhaps the most disturbing one. What if the Griffin itself has become a kind of prison? Throughout the episode, every hallucination seems designed to achieve one goal: break people emotionally until they lose all sense of reality. The force aboard the Griffin doesn't appear interested in killing anyone directly. Instead, it manipulates its victims into destroying themselves. That's exactly what happened to the original crew, and it's almost what happened to Kirk, Spock, and La'an. The pattern never changes. Why Division 12 changes everything. Just when the Enterprise escapes, another Starfleet vessel arrives, not to destroy the Griffin, not to investigate it, but to quietly tow it away. The organization responsible is Division 12, a branch of Starfleet introduced only briefly in Season 4. Unlike Section 31, which handles covert intelligence and Black Ops missions, Division 12 specializes in investigating unexplained phenomena, the strange, the impossible, and the cases conventional science can't easily explain. That tiny detail is incredibly important. If Starfleet believed the Griffin was simply contaminated or damaged, a standard engineering team would have handled it. Instead, they call the Federation's experts in unexplained mysteries. That tells us this isn't the first incident of its kind. More importantly, it tells us Starfleet may already know far more about these phenomena than ordinary officers like Pike, Spock, or Levin. The Griffin isn't treated as an isolated accident. It's treated like evidence. Evidence that belongs somewhere secret. The biggest clue everyone missed. Now let's return to the episode's final seconds. Everything appears normal again. Spock has survived. Kirk is recovering. The Griffin has been secured. Mission over. Or so it seems. La'an quietly looks through the Enterprise window. Standing outside is Rose Harper. She doesn't wave frantically. She doesn't ask for help. She doesn't attack. She simply smiles. Then she slowly raises one finger to her lips. Shh. Most viewers interpreted that as one final jump scare. But it's far more meaningful than that. Harper isn't warning the audience. She's communicating with La'an, almost as if they're now sharing a secret. It's the same pattern we've seen throughout the episode. The entity never tries to form this kind of relationship with Kirk or Spock. Only La'an receives direct messages. Only La'an sees Harper after leaving the Griffin. That strongly suggests whatever happened aboard the Griffin isn't over. It followed the one person it considered special. So here's the question that could shape the rest of Strange New Worlds Season 4. Did La'an truly escape the USS Griffin, or did a part of the Griffin escape with her? If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep Star Trek lore, hidden details, and ending explanations, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know your own theory in the comments. What do you think the entity really was? And do you believe Rose Harper was trying to warn La'an or recruit her?